Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. This episode of Life's Best Medicine is brought to you by the great people at Simply Snackin'. 10 flavors of beef and chicken, humanely raised, grass-fed beef, free-range chicken. And I'm excited about the 10 flavors because I'm heading off to the jungles of Guatemala on a medical trip, and I can have a new flavor every day and not get bored. I'm going to pack them in my suitcase because they're light and easy, and I could bust them out whenever I need to. So if I get stuck somewhere and everyone's eating terrible food, I could have some healthy, great snacks and still stick to my low-carb lifestyle. So thank you, Simply Snackin', for again sponsoring this episode and for bringing these important stories to the people. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today's kind of a cool one for me because I have my landlord here, the principal of the school, the president, the big shot here at San Diego Christian. And before we start, I just want to tell you my youngest daughter goes here, and she's having just such a great experience. And this is a great place. If you're thinking of somewhere to send your kids, this is where I send my child, and the one I love a ton. And so, it's so great just to hear the atmosphere here of how the teachers are, how they love the kids and they care and they're invested in. And Dr. Kevin Corsini, and you're leading the way and you set the tone. And, from the first time we met, I felt really comfortable, and I love what you're doing here, being that we're both new kids here on campus, but it's kind of a miracle how it worked out that I ended up here and you're the leader here. So, and also, we just got to do an extended fast together, which was a lot of fun. We could support each other through that. And I just want to hear your perspective because, we talked about a lot about how it's hard for me being a doctor of faith, and people go, well, prove this, prove that. And it's hard. Sometimes you say, well, it's not scientific that I can prove it to you. I could just tell you my story, my testimony. And so you've been a huge blessing to the school, I know. And so welcome. And thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks so much. I really do appreciate being here today. Thanks for having me. And I'm just so thankful that you're on our campus with us. I mean, we're fortunate as a Christian college to have full-time physicians staffing the clinic here who are also believers in Jesus Christ. We care for our students, and we love having your daughter here as well. Part of my journey, I was actually at a medical college before I was here. I helped when I was back east at another university, helped start a med school at the university I was at, and then spent some time working there as well. And so it was part of my responsibility was hiring a ton of physicians to come in and serve as teachers, as faculty at the med school as we got that launched. It was a Christian university, and a lot of people told us, like you just said, as we were starting the school, you'll never find Christian physicians to come teach at a med school who will teach from a biblical or a Christian worldview. They're just not out there. You're going to have to compromise. And for us, every faculty member we had, we wanted to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And the experts said, man, you're not going to be able to find them. And it was remarkable over the course of about 3 years as we got the med school set up, College of Medicine, how one after another across multiple fields, from emergency medicine to ophthalmology to we have several neurologists show up, right? Pediatricians, from each of the field who were committed believers in Jesus Christ and also experts in their field. And I think there are a lot more out there than people realize. And we all have different journeys of faith, right? For those of us who follow Jesus Christ, there's a number of different ways we come. We might have been raised in the church. We might have had a conversion experience. A lot of times it's a personal change that occurs in our life. Apologetics is a big part of it as well, just proving our faith to those who may not believe. But today I want to talk about maybe a different angle to come to for a person who may be on a journey of faith. Because I'm often challenged too. How do you prove it? Prove it. How do you prove it? And so I want to take maybe one step back and just ask the question, is there an immaterial aspect to personhood? When we think of what makes a person, what's different about a person than a dolphin? Why am I a person? Does a dolphin have personhood? Does my dog have personhood? My dog has emotions. My dog does. It's crazy emotions, right? So it's emotions doesn't necessarily make for a person. It's not necessarily higher intelligence in my mind, because, and I would say that because there are people, humans born with diseases, right? Abnormalities that don't have higher intelligence, but we wouldn't say that they're not a person just because they don't have higher intelligence because they were born with mental deficiencies. In my mind, what makes for personhood is that there is a material aspect to us, and there's also an immaterial aspect to us. So that's really the core of personhood, that we are made as a person with both the material that lives in this world, and there's something immaterial about us as well. And theologians can argue and have for centuries, is it a soul? Is it a spirit? Is it a spirit and a soul? If you really dig into the Hebrew and the Greek of the Christian scriptures, you also have the heart, you have the mind, you have these different, you have the conscience. Each of these are aspects of what we would say is the immaterial person. So let's just back up with that, just a fundamental question. Is there an immaterial aspect, something that persists beyond this life? That when we die, physically die, is there something about us that persists afterwards? Some immaterial aspect core to who we are and our person that persists after the physical body lays dormant or dead. And some people would have, well, how do you know? How can you tell that? Well, studies have looked at, and you can read about it in the newspaper, or there's tons of books on this, are people who died on the operating table or died in a car wreck, right? And while they were dead, where there were no vital signs, no brain waves, no heartbeat, that they rose out of their body, right? And they saw the white light, and they followed the white light up the white tunnel, right? And some people would say, well, see, that's proof. They saw the white light. They went up the tunnel. There was something afterwards. But you can replicate that in a laboratory through fainting spells. You can actually force this and replicate it just by having people do fainting spells in a laboratory, and they see the white light. So clearly something else is going on there, that it's not, we're not forcing people into heaven just because we force a fainting spell on them. And okay, so I get that. So we'll put the white light going up, fainting spell, we're going to set that aside. There is a second body of growing research regarding out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences that involve what are called corroborating experiences, corroborating evidences. And this is different than just seeing the white light. This is when a person dies, right? Or has a near-death experience in a car wreck, right? And their physical faculties are severely limited, right? They're in trauma. Their heart has stopped beating. Their brain waves have gone nil, and they're out. And they have a sensation of rising out of their body. They can see themselves on the table or in the car wreck or wherever they are. And during that experience where they go up and they're looking at themselves from a different perspective, they might maybe go up through the ceiling. One example that's been documented, a guy died in the operating room, rose up, saw himself, saw the doctors and nurses in the room, and saw himself going up through the hospital buildings. And as he was going up into the sky, looked down on the roof of the hospital and saw a shoe laying upside down next to the air conditioner compressor, I guess, air conditioner unit up on the roof of the building, and thought, well, that's odd, and continued on his way up, and then was resuscitated, and all of a sudden was back and woke up. And the doctors and the nurses, asked him, hey, so what happened? And he's like, wow, it was crazy. I rose, I saw you guys, I heard you talking, I heard what you were saying, and I rose to that, and I saw a shoe up on the roof, and it was upside down. I just thought that was really strange, but now I'm back here. And guess what? They went upstairs, they went up to the roof, had a janitor unlock the roof, and lo and behold, there was a shoe upside down next to the air conditioner. And that is not something that person could have known was was there. I mean, it was impossible for that person to know, and yet it was. It's what we call a corroborating evidence of, wait a minute, there's something else corroborating that you actually saw something. And because, with technology now, with the internet, we're able to communicate and gather data in ways we weren't able to before. There is a growing and growing body of academic literature of these type of experiences, where a person dies in a car wreck, right? And they're going and they hear other people, oh gosh, if they had just only, right? And then they're resuscitated. They're able to tell other people, yeah, and there was like 4 cars back. There was a mom and a daughter, and they were talking about me, and they decided to pray for us. And all of a sudden they're resuscitated, and they say, share this, right? And the paramedics go back 4 cars back, and they corroborate what was reported of, yeah, actually, that's exactly what we said. How would they even know that? We were in a closed car, windows up, and we did actually do that. And there are not dozens, there's not hundreds, but there are thousands of these types of examples that are now being documented around the world. There are some emergency rooms actually that are now very intentionally putting objects that are out of sight up on top of cabinets and shelves so they can query patients when they come back, because they're having these experiences, seeing these things coming back. And that doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen every single time a person dies, but it's happening enough to demonstrate, hey, something's going on here. There's enough of these corroborating experiences. In fact, I recently read one journal that was committed, it was dedicated just to people who had been born blind. These are people that were born blind, or who were got blind, received blindness, young, early in childhood, that have these experiences. And while they have this out-of-body, near-death type of experience, they see for the very first time. So they're experiencing sight for the very first time. Oftentimes, sometimes some of the examples they have are people experiencing colors for the very first time. And they're able to see and recount. And so when they revive, they're able to recount things that they never would have been able to because they were blind. I look at the arrangement of the pictures behind you on your wall. I mean, imagine a blind person would never know that. They're not going to go around and know, oh, the big picture's up here and the small ones, oh, and there's like a diploma over here. And yet when they're resuscitated, they're still blind. They still can't see, but they can give all types of visual descriptions from the time that they were, from the time that they had this out-of-body near-death experience. And so I don't know that this is a proof for Christianity, but I do believe that it's a proof that there is an immaterial aspect to our personhood, that there's an immaterial realm. And I think it raises some interesting questions, because while the physical faculties of the person are limited or gone, just dead, right? Their blood's not circulating, their brain waves are not pulsing, there's no pulse. They're at a time when they really shouldn't be able to do anything physically, they actually instead have a very heightened sense in other places. And get this, what's really interesting is they can remember it. They were someplace else, they heard or saw something, and where was that encoded? Was that memory encoded back in their brain that's dead, that's still, where was that memory encoded? Yet they can remember it, that some part of our immaterial aspect has memory and emotion. And yet when they're revived, so are they just teleporting it back to their brain? It just raises some very interesting questions. And so for me, I think that's at the outset demonstrates good evidence. And this is now being reported in academic scholarship. It's being researched, it's being followed. That demonstrates, you know what? I think we do have more and more evidence for the immaterial aspect of personhood that needs to be taken seriously, that then leads us into a path. Well, if that's real, then I need to be open to things that are about the immaterial realm. And that's where spirituality comes in.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing. That's where a lot of us, like we just say, oh, dust to dust, like you die and that's it. You go in the ground, you're done, whatever, you leave a legacy, that kind of thing. But, I'll tell you, along those lines, when I was a young doc back before my gray hairs and gray beard, I was at USC, and one of the head trauma surgeons, were there, and he was just a really nice guy. And I just saw how he treated everyone, was really kind. I said, so you're really a nice guy. And he goes, yeah. And I asked him about faith. He goes, yeah, I'm a guy of faith. He goes, I always wasn't, but something happened that really changed my views. I said, what was that? He said, well, One time this kid came in, drive-by shooting, died on the table 5 times. I scrubbed out, went and told the family, it doesn't look like he's going to make it. I just want to let you know we're working as best we can. And his partner was working on the kid. He gets back, scrubs back in, goes in, kid ends up surviving. And his partner goes, man, he died twice while you were gone, right? It was a really nasty, bad thing, like pumping blood in him and doing all that stuff. And so anyways, the kid's on a ventilator, wakes up, and, they get him off the vent. And he goes, hey, doc, you still looking for your watch? I said, what? He said, as a matter of fact, I am. He said, yeah, because when you were talking to my mom, my dad he described the whole scene to the doctor. And the doctor said, there's something, this is crazy. But the kid said, you talked to my dad. They called my brother on the phone. He was at home. And he described the look on his mom's face. How is dad? And the doctor, when he was leaving, hid his watch on the side of the table, and it broke the pin out of it. And he just stuck in his coat pocket, went in, scrubbed into surgery, and he forgot. And then he was like, where the heck's my watch? So he's like, you're kidding. He goes, it's in your white coat in your locker. And he goes in there, white, maybe it's a coincidence. And I was like, wow, he told me. And I was like, man, he's pretty courageous to tell me that, because a lot of people might think you're nutty if you tell a story like that. But then to hear there's more corroborating, like thousands of cases like this, and you say, okay, is there more? And I think that's the question you have to ask. It doesn't, like you said, it's not proving Christianity, and but is there a spirit? Is there something else that we can't fathom in our brains, because most of us haven't had that experience? As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, my brother would tell me he was going through a stressful time in life, and not really a believer, but he said one time he was driving and he left his body while he was driving. He could look down, he could see the whole scene. He said it was the scariest thing, because he's like, holy cow, I can look down on myself. He saw like the car, and he described this scene. And my brother's he's a very grounded guy. And so it says, well, maybe there is something to this type of stuff.
Yeah, and once we open the door to, okay, so maybe there is some immaterial aspect to us. Maybe there is, call it a soul, call it a spirit, whatever you want to call it. We don't have to put a label to it. Then it opens up to the question to, okay, what do I need to know about that world? Like, what is it out there? And for me, I've done a lot of exploring in my own life of, okay, what's true and what's not, and what do I believe? And for me, it led me to Christianity. And that, I look at the story of the Bible, and it's like, yeah, I believe that helps me understand the physical world and the immaterial world. And for me, it's been a life-changing experiencing being a follower of Jesus Christ. I mean, so not only do I have good evidence to, I think there's an immaterial realm, but my personal experience with Christianity is, hey, God is very alive. Jesus is very much alive. And so as a second layer, it's like, there is the immaterial realm, and the Bible helps me understand it. And my faith experienced on a day-to-day basis, that praxis for me is an ongoing evidence of, oh man, God is clearly alive in my life.
Yeah, I think the fact I'm here at your campus, it's just like, how did I get here? How did this happen? How did God open the doors that you knew about direct primary care? I didn't have to explain. And and it worked out like at the same time that it's just one of those things where you start realizing, people call it coincidence. You go, okay, all these doors had to open at the same time. For my partner to want to leave Chicago at the same time I'm leaving, it was just, when you say logically, could I have planned all this stuff? I couldn't have. You go, okay, then my faith gets stronger. And what's funny is, and maybe you can help me with this one, a lot of my atheist friends will say, well, you have a belief. It's not faith, it's a belief. You believe stuff, but you you can't prove that. They basically chalk it all up to hocus pocus stuff. They go, you're just weak and you need something that makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say belief and faith are a little different, because I can believe something and sit on the sidelines. Having faith is belief plus action. It's like, oh, I'm going to take a step. I'm going to step out and actually endorse in my life and step forward. And so for me, it's, my faith is, I believe that the story of the Bible, I believe that Jesus Christ is real. And my faith is, I'm going to live it out in a very tangible way each and every day. And as far as it being a crutch, absolutely. Yeah, I embrace that wholeheartedly. Yeah.
I just interviewed a guy. He says, not a crutch, it's life support, man. This is not my crutch. It's a life support, right? And he's a great guy, and his whole life got changed. And so what I'm having is person after person giving their testimony and their stories of faith and what they believe. And I think you're right. It's like believing something in faith. Like faith is based on my life experience too, but faith of the Lord sometimes just saying, hey, look, take this step and do it. And there's stuff I've done in my life, and my wife, like, it's just like, I don't know why I'm supposed to do this. I'm telling her, like, I just feel like I should be doing this podcast, or I feel like the Lord's telling me this, so I'm just going to do it. And it's never turned out bad. It's always like, he doesn't lead you down the wrong path. And I think a lot of people have that fear of, I'm going to stay in this bad relationship or this bad job because I'm afraid to take that, because you have comfort. For me, I had to take a huge pay cut to come here. And so it's like, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Every day, and when I'm two miles away and I hear worship music happening right now, and I'm surrounded by young people that we can maybe impact, and you see them on their journey, and what word can we say to help them? Those kind of things. I think, you say, yeah, it's definitely worth it, because it's not all about the money at some point, right? We have to reassess that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was a teenager, late teenager, I started to pray, Lord, lead me in clear and obvious ways, wanting God to guide my life, and knowing that I'm dumb, I'm thick, I'll miss it. But Lord, lead me really clear, step by step. And I've prayed that for decades now. But then secondly, give me the faith to follow, because oftentimes God will lead us places and ask us to take a step of faith. And so, I've prayed also, give me the faith to follow. And there have been multiple times in my life, like you, in this step of, from a worldly perspective, it maybe doesn't make the most sense in the world to take a big pay cut, to step away from a successful practice. I've had been a few different times in my life where I had good friends, good people, even family say, are you sure? Like, why are you making that change? It's like, I really believe this is what God's asking me to do. And it was a step of faith, and God blessed me for it. Over and over, God has blessed me for taking steps of faith, of obedience. And that's the difference in believing. I can believe something is what God wants. Faith is saying, Matt, I'm going to act on it as well.
Yeah, I think that's too, because you could believe there's no gravity, but you're wrong. You could have a belief, but my faith has never been where they said you were wrong. And maybe you have to change your path, or maybe you better reassess whether that's something. Because I just laugh, because in my life, I remember, like, I went to Vietnam, and it was one of the biggest spiritual experiences of my life, like, to really tap in. And I explained this on the podcast, but when I heard someone announce it, I looked at my wife, I said, that's the last place on earth I'm going, right? Like, there's no way I'm going. And then I end up in Vietnam, like, on this medical trip. It's crazy, because I'm like, okay, that's when I usually know it's the Lord, is when I say, there's no way that's happening. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to step out of my comfort zone and do this thing. This podcast I fought for 2 years, because I'm like, I don't have time. I'm changing practice. It's not a good time. The Lord's like, okay, now's the time. Let's do it, because we need it right now. We need hope and faith. And, to hear these stories, because so many people are searching right now. And when your rug gets pulled from your foundations are gone, and you say, okay, what's important? What matters? Is my faith in my 401k? Is my faith, even in Christian friends of mine, they're like, oh, if this president doesn't win, then life's over. It's like, well, God has a bigger plan. Right. So sometimes when we live our lives that way, it just makes things so much better.
Yeah. You talk about having a spiritual experience. I've had, many spiritual experiences as well. I think it's important for us to distinguish between small s spiritual experiences and capital S spiritual experiences. Because I think the Christian community in the Western world is not, I'm going to characterize here, right? So just give me permission. It's not very spiritual.
We'll give you permission. Since you're my landlord, man, you can do whatever you want.
So I don't think that Christians in the Western world are very spiritual people. I think we're strong on faith. We're strong on knowledge. Strong on actions. But when it comes to spiritual exercise, think of it like a muscle. Exercising the spiritual muscle, exercising the immaterial aspect of us. We don't do a lot of that. I mean, as Christians, we don't meditate. I mean, we don't spend a lot of time just being still and meditating on the Lord, which is a very biblical practice. We don't just sit and be still before the Lord. We don't exercise that muscle. And when I look at other world religions, I think some of the most spiritual people, small s spiritual, are like Buddhists. Buddhists and Hindus are very spiritual people because they are very much focused on the immaterial realm and dedicating huge chunks of their life to exercising that muscle. But in my mind, it's a small s spiritual. And I think that what they're pursuing in Buddhism and then also in Hinduism is very real. But I don't think it's true. And that's an important distinction, that everything that is real isn't necessarily true. Think of Las Vegas. You go to Vegas, hey, there's a lot of stuff that's really real and tangible. But you wake up in the morning, a lot of what is not true. Everything that's real is not true. It doesn't point us, right? Somebody who takes steroids and gets all jacked up, would you say that that person is healthy? Would you say that person is strong? I'd say, man, they're kind of messed up. I mean,
Yeah.
they've not done their bodies any favor getting jacked up on steroids. In the same way, I think in the spiritual realm, what's important is that we pursue truth. I had a good friend who was training for a Ironman triathlon, and I went out with them at the beach. They wanted to practice swimming in the ocean. And so I was walking along, kind of pacing them as this person was out in the water swimming, I don't know, 20, 30 yards out. And walking along, and I'm watching this person start swimming 20 yards out, 30 yards out, 40 yards out. And they were going on an angle, right? Farther and farther out. It was like, starting to shout. It's like, hey, you got to come back, right? And they were pursuing something with all diligence, but they were moving farther and farther away, right? And that can be true with our spirituality, exercising that spiritual muscle. It's important that we remain focused and pointed towards what is true and truthful. And in my own life, I would say for me, Christianity is true and truthful. Hinduism, thousands of gods, I would say is very real. I would say the immaterial realm is very real, and what they're experiencing is very real. These folks who, Buddhists who meditate, you read about them meditating for like 3 years, right? They're just sitting there. I think that's very real, but I don't think it's getting them anywhere closer to the truth. If anything, I think it's veering them off. And so as a believer in Jesus Christ, I think truthfulness, pursuing capital T, truth is a part of leading us towards capital S, spirituality, bringing us to a healthy place spiritually, right? Where we can be made whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so many people, what I see in life is so many people aren't going to be happy till they have that Ferrari, or they're not going to be happy till their house is bigger than their neighbor's house, or they have a fancier swimming pool, whatever. And you see this like you're swimming after the wind, right? You're thirsting for things that you think are going to make you happier, when you can realize, hey, just having a cup of coffee with my wife and kids is great. Like this morning, I got to spend some time just talking to them. It's like, I would have been driving at that time and thinking, man, I'm so blessed. Like, this is great. And so I think sometimes when you have that life perspective where you say, okay, let me settle in where I'm at and make the impact. Because I think what happens is, like California with all the crazy laws, people say, I'm just leaving. So at some point, you can't just flee. At some point, you're going to have to stand and fight, or you're going to have to stand up for what you believe. And I've found, like, just this morning, I did a podcast with someone. She goes, I respect you because you kind of stand up with what you believe and try to do it in a nice way. But people get alienated by that. It's hard when you say have hope. Like for me, I mentioned something about hope and faith, and my partner on the podcast is a New Yorker, a hothead on my other podcast, Low Carb MD. But he says the F word and no one blinks an eye. But if I say the faith F word, then people freak out for 3 days. Or if I say hope, there's like, prove your hope, prove your faith. And it gets into this argument rather than saying, hey, yeah, we should all have some hope and some peace. And I always wonder if those are the people with the least amount of peace and hope that get offended by someone else talking about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think not only is it important, but we're told to, hey, share our life experiences, right? Share what Jesus Christ is doing in our life. And like you, I have an enormous amount of hope. I have an enormous amount of peace. I went through periods of my life where I had some serious doubts of, okay, what's real in this world, right? And I did. I explored a lot. I went and studied the Bible. I went and spent 4 years learning Greek. I spent 3 years learning Hebrew. I went and looked at ancient manuscripts. I traveled to go look at the actual Dead Sea Scrolls to see what they actually said. And at the end of the day, I found enormous comfort, enormous peace in, hey, you know what the Bible says is true. It's reliable. I can put my faith and put my life into its care. And it's changed me. It has transformed who I am. If you had somebody who went on a special diet and it just changed them, right? They lost a bunch of weight, they got healthy, their complexion was outstanding, they would share that, right? They wouldn't be like, well, I got to keep this a secret. I mean, I lost a bunch of weight. No, I'm really healthy. I better not tell you. They'd be like, man, this has been awesome. This has been amazing. Like, it's changed me. I've been on the such and such diet, or I've started doing this exercise, or I've read this new author, right? When we experience life change, we want to share that because it gives us peace. It gives us hope. It helps us. And I'm not going to say Christianity makes you feel better. I'm not going to say Christianity makes you happy. And I'm certainly not going to say that Christianity makes your life any easier. Boy, but it gives you an anchor to put your hope in, and it gives you a peace that the Bible says surpasses understanding. Like, it doesn't make sense to have that kind of peace. But I will say it's been, for my life, it's been very real. And it's something I want to share, right? I do want to share it because it's been great.
Yeah, and I think that's an important aspect, that whole, like you're saying, for me, that peace that surpasses understanding, right? That's, I've been in situations with, and what's fun having the podcast is having, a friend of mine, Mark Hernandez, ER doc. We were in a crazy situation in MS-13 neighborhood, and we walked in. I'm like, how do you feel, man? He goes, I feel peaceful. How do you feel? Me too. Like, we're in this neighborhood where everyone says you're going to get shot when you're, running to the, I mean, we had a peace with this. And that's the thing that really I wish more people can experience. And I think you're right. I think when you see, and I think what happens is we all become so jaded by our life experience that we say, okay, what are you selling? Like, okay, Brian, are you saying this stuff just because you're trying to earn your way to heaven? You go on these trips, do you do that? And I'm like, I've already paid, right? I mean, but it's an outflow of the heart at some point where you understand, it's like, I love you enough that I want to help you and try to give you that peace that I have, because I see you stressed and tense and worried all the time and think the world's a terrible place and everyone's out to get you. But when you say that, people get offended, and it bothers them. And it's always surprised me, but it's true. There's no doubt. There's people listening to this podcast right now saying, these guys they think they know the right answer. And that's what always ends up happening, is it always turns into this discussion. It comes to, okay, do you believe in ghosts? Does it, what happens if there's an alien that comes? Now, are they saved or not? Once if there's some guy in a remote village who doesn't hear anything, what happens to them? I was like, well, it's really about you. Really, ultimately, anyone listening, it's about you. Where's your peace? Is your peace in the who's running the government? Is your peace in your 401k? Is your peace in having the nicest car in the neighborhood? And that's something we all have to answer for ourselves.
Yeah. You mentioned a remote village. So, Christianity, we call our hope the gospel. The gospel in the Greek means good news. The gospel is the good news that Jesus Christ offers us, right? Of forgiveness, of hope, of redemption. And
Grace.
I say this because the most powerful place I've ever seen that on display, of people who shouldn't have had hope, should not have experienced this, that did, is in Rwanda. My wife and I have gone to work in Rwanda. We've gone about a half dozen times, taken a couple hundred students there on different trips, worked with folks there. And for those who don't know the story of Rwanda, right, it was genocide, almost 1 million people killed in the span of 100 days using machetes. It was a more efficient killing machine than the Nazis back in the early 90s. And it was genocide, Hutus and Tutsis. And if you can imagine having your entire family butchered in front of your eyes by your neighbors. I mean, and this wasn't people who came in from another village. It was people, they lived with each other amongst the, in their own villages with each other. And having your neighbor that you'd celebrated weddings with, that you'd exchanged goods with, all of a sudden come in and kill your whole family and watch that. I mean, that's part of the story of Rwanda is mass genocide of people killing each other, neighbor killing each other. And what's going on now is really powerful. The first year we went for the purpose of clinical mental health. We were going to train local counselors on grief counseling, trauma care. And as we were there, we realized, man, there is something going on in Rwanda that we were not aware of. It took a couple of trips really to get our brain wrapped around. And it's a story of restoration and redemption, that the Rwandans have embraced the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm not going to say everybody across the country, but it's a major theme of the country, all the way up to the president, that we need to forgive each other in order to be restored as a nation, just as Jesus Christ forgave us. And they have what are called villages of reconciliation, where perpetrators of genocide are living side by side of the survivors. And I've been to these places where you have a woman who watched her whole family get butchered in the genocide, who now has forgiven those people who killed her family, and they're living together side by side in a village, where you have victims of genocide, not that they were killed, but their whole families were killed, with perpetrators, and they genuinely love each other and care about each other and have forgiven each other at a heart level because of what Jesus Christ has forgiven them of. And their stories of the gospel are so powerful. That they are, and not just believing something, but taking a step of faith, of being reconciled one to another and living. And now, it's been so many years that they're actually starting to intermarry now. So you have perpetrators and victims intermarrying. And from a clinical mental health standpoint, I mean, that's the area my doctorate in. It's a beautiful thing. It's not, oh, people have been brainwashed and, oh, they're repressing. It's like, they are not repressing old thoughts. They're not ignoring the trauma at all. They've embraced it and they're moving through it and past it. And it's so remarkably powerful. And in my mind, what a beautiful example of a person taking a step of faith and living out that. And now they have hope and they have peace, a peace and it's making that nation whole, right? It's really healing that nation. It's a beautiful example of what the gospel is all about.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. And they're seeing the same in Kenya. They're seeing it all over the world in different areas where people, when you're killing your own neighbors and because the reality, even now, this is a big thing we were talking about. Tro, my partner on the podcast, is Armenian, and what's happening in Armenia right now. And it's another genocide. It's a disaster. It's devastating. That, and all their church relics are being destroyed and all this. Gosh, there's no respect for, someone who believes different. And I think, and looking at that in the United States where we're at, if someone raises a view that's different than you, like really, my view is really that religion is the last thing you could really attack, and no one says a word, really. Like, you could say all the Christians are bad, or all Christians are this way, or all Christians are this way, whatever. And I think that that's a very dangerous place, because once you try to overcome hate with hate, what's happening with the police, if you hate all police and you think they're all out to get you, your perspective of them is different, rather than saying most police are nice people. There's a couple of jerks that we got to take care of, right? That they should have the full force of the law thrown at them. So it becomes, when you generalize, and that's what I've seen is dangerous, where people go, oh, you're Christian, I don't want to hear what you have to say, right? Or you're Muslim, we don't like you because you want to kill us, right? So I think when you say, no, you need to know that individual and love that individual. And I think that's the thing, is what I've said from the beginning is like, look, you're not going to overcome hate with hate. There's no one in the world that's ever worked. But if you show compassion and love, like what they're doing in other countries, right? In Rwanda, which had the biggest life, I mean, to be able to forgive and love your neighbor and do stuff, that's what we're called to do. And it's so hard if your neighbor just slaughtered your family. Holy cow, right? That's a real example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about, all Christians are bad. You have to consider, okay, what's the sample size? You're looking at Christians in the United States in the 21st century. All right, well, that's kind of a small sample size when you got, 2 millennia, right? 2,000 years of Christians across cultures and nations around the globe. And we're just going to say, well, okay, so maybe Christians in the United States aren't the best example of Christendom. Oh, well, what about the Crusades? It's like, okay, well, you go back, were the Crusades really a good representation of Christendom at that time? I mean, if you look globally at Christians during that time, or even in that region, is that really a good example? Is that a good sample set to evaluate Christianhood? And again, I would go back to, being a Christian doesn't make you happy. It doesn't solve all your problems, and certainly doesn't mean you don't have issues. And it doesn't mean that people won't take advantage of the title for their own ends. But as you look at, I think it's dangerous when we take a very small subset of and say, oh, well, that's what Christians are like, and so I don't like them. A lot of the most committed representations of people who are committed to Christ and represent most accurately are not in the spotlight, are not seen by a lot of people, who are kind, godly, good people. And when you get exposed to those sort of people, you're like, I want to be more like that person. What have they got?
And I think that's, as Christians, that's our responsibility, right? That's our responsibility, not to be the one who's the example of what not to be, because we're very good at being hypocrites. We're very good at not being kind to someone. If someone shows up at church, no one stops by to say hi to them, or no one reaches out, and someone's struggling. That's what people have experienced, and that's what I see. And I think the other thing is all the wars because religion fight against each other. That's why all these people are killed, because of all the bad out there.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, my hope is, at least for my own life and for this college, here at San Diego Christian College, that we would be a bright light, that we would be a solid example of the power of Jesus Christ to change lives. And what I say is that we want to be a campus where the love of Christ is absolutely palpable. At any time anybody's on this campus, that they know that, hey, that's a place where people love each other well. Jesus says in the New Testament, they'll know you're my disciples by your love for one another, not because you were right, or not because you we're the strongest, or not because you voted the right way. It's because of your love. And I think as believers, that's what we need to lead with and lean on heavily is our love for one another, regardless of who the person is, regardless of what their beliefs are, regardless of what their background is. That we don't just love each other as Christians, but we love each other well, love our neighbor, love those who come to this campus. And for me, that is of preeminence important, that we love each other with the love of Christ.
Yeah, and you hear it here. I'll tell you, just walking around campus, sometimes I'll try to get out for a walk during the day, and I hear what kids are talking about. They're talking about helping each other. Hey, you can get through this, and the support. Other campuses, I hear the F word every other word. You hear, just to be in a place like that, and parents, look, if you're sending your kids, you want them to be around that where someone's going to encourage them and say, I noticed you're struggling with alcohol. I noticed this. Can I help you? So I've had people brought to my office that we can pray with or spend time with and talk to them and say, hey, let's try to help you in this, because there's so much judgment and young people these days are going through a hard time. So sometimes when you're at a big, huge university, you get lost in the shuffle, you don't make a difference. And I see, have coaches come to me and say, hey, there's a kid struggling, doc, what do you think? Is there anything we can do to help them? And so they care. They don't just say, okay, get rid of that kid, we'll get a new kid on the team. And some of these guys have had struggles over the years, and to see their story and to see their victories, to see that they're going to be a testimony for other new students coming in. And, it's just an amazing place here. And I think that's a huge thing. I'm so happy my daughter's here, and because she says, professors say, come in and talk, please come and talk to me, and we'll try to get you squared away if you need help with stuff or if you don't understand something, because it's so easy, especially in that age when you're away from family, you're away from what's familiar, and you're in a scary place. And one of the realities, I know we all worry about COVID right now, and the other thing is that you all did a great job of saying what's safe, what's not safe, how do we keep our kids safe, because that's critically important. We'll spend money, and you guys spend a lot of money to make things be right, but also just saying, hey, we want to love these kids, and it's not just about academics, it's about getting them so that they're going to be successful in life and that they're going to impact the world. And I see you're doing community outreach, kids are going and helping and serving, and man, I mean my kids changed going on to the third world with me. They saw what's important, and I think those are such critical aspects, not just studying physics or whatever it is.
Yeah, we say, part of what we say is we're all about producing graduates that are centered on Christ and who are equipped for life. And I've got two in college as well. They're back on the East Coast. And one of the things I realized was I don't want them to come home when they graduate. I love the kids, right? I love my daughters, but when they finish college, I think as a parent, there's this unvoiced expectation that they're going to be ready for the grown-up world. And for us, we want to produce graduates. We want them to do well in their courses and graduate. We want them to become more like Christ. As you talk about judgment, that's where Christians get accused of being judgmental. And I don't think being judgmental and finger pointing is love. I think compassion and pursuit is love, right? And I think when we get closer to Christ, we see someone who is doing something that's not good for them, right? They're in a bad spot, and it will hurt ourselves. We'll make bad choices for ourselves. Being centered on Christ is demonstrating kindness and compassion and pursuit of coming along that side that person, saying, hey, how can I help you? And at our school, we're about producing graduates who are centered on Christ and also equipped for life. And so what we're doing more and more of, and you'll be a part of this, is training people how to have a healthy lifestyle, how to manage debt, how to handle a credit card, how to go buy your first house or find your first apartment, how to finance a car, how to manage, healthy relationships in adulthood. And when students graduate here, it's not just about the transcript. It's not just about the grades. We want them to be equipped for life, because we believe each student here, that God has a plan for them, that God has desires, that God wants great things for each one of them. And we want to equip them to go out and launch into whatever that is. And so getting good grades, making great friends, becoming an expert in your academic field, and being ready to join the grown-up world and understanding, how do I manage a credit card? How do I go buy that first car? And how is that going to affect me when I try to go buy a house? And what does it look like to have a healthy marriage? And we want to come alongside our students and equip them in all those areas as well. That's important to us. And part of that, you mentioned, is service. We worked really hard. And we did spend a lot of money to open our doors, and we are open. We're one of the few colleges or universities in California that's open. And so we have students on campus, we have students in the classroom, and we worked hard to get approval from our county and through the state to be able to do that, to provide in-person instruction. Took a lot of work, and it was, for us, a step we thought that was important because we believe students need community. They want to be with each other. They're tired of being at home.
We all need community. Yeah, we all need community.
And so we did that, and it's been a big step for us, and it was really important. We believe we could do it in a safe and healthy manner, and we have. And I think that's the best environment for students to learn in and live in. You know, a lot of people said, hey, this pandemic is going to open the door for online education. We won't need colleges anymore. Everyone's just going to do online education in the future. It's proved that this is what we need. And I think it's just the opposite. I think absolutely the opposite. What we've seen is students of college age want to be with their peers and need to be equipped and prepared for adulthood, and doing it online is not adequate in and of itself. Surely online education can be a component of that, but students want to be on campus, and the families and the students have just been so, I've heard over and over from parents and from students, they're so thankful that we opened our doors and they could be back here on campus.
Yeah, and I hear it from the students too. I hear it from the students and I see them. Yeah, and it's amazing. And I think you put out a questionnaire or something saying what percent, who would like to do just online, who would like to be in person. And it was overwhelming how many people said, I want to be in person education. I don't know if you know those exact numbers, but it was pretty overwhelming, the feedback from the parents and the students.
Yeah, I think we had about 20% who said, and it was primarily just because they didn't quite feel safe yet, wanted to be online. We saw a lot of those switch over though. Once they saw that we were open and it was safe, it was like, okay, well, I'm ready to come back. Can I come back now? And so we maxed out. Our resident housing has been maxed out. Campus has been, full, and it's great to see the student life here. And again, knowing that they're keeping their masks on, they're being healthy. I think that's part of preparing a student for adulthood, just being responsible for yourself and for your community, taking those steps and saying, hey, you don't have to be locked behind a closed door.
Yeah, I think there's so many messages here on this podcast. I'm so glad you joined me because I know you have a wisdom and you have life experience. You've been through it and you've questioned your faith. You've gone to places and had to touch the manuscript and really see it for yourself, because I'm that type too. And, for me, people know my journey by now, but it was like, I was a skeptic, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and, I had Christians just all around me. But it was their love, their compassion, and the lives changed. I saw people go from being drug addicts to helping kids and doing, it's like, how does that happen? It doesn't make logic. Like you said, so many of these things don't make logical sense. When I felt called out of my old job, the head of the HMO called me and goes, Brian, you're the number one paid doctor here. Do you know that, right? Like, are you okay? Are you buying a red sports car and dating? Are you having a midlife crisis? Basically was the question. I go, no, look, I've reassessed my important, what's important in life, really. Is it worth it killing myself for a few extra bucks? It's really not. I don't know I don't need to drive a fancy car. Now I live 2 miles from my house. I walk onto a campus and just see people loving each other all the time. And so, when you start reassessing, and I think a lot of people listening now are trying to reassess their life and go, what really is important right now going through this? I think we're at a major time of reassessing, like, okay, is faith important? Is it not important? Is my marriage important? My kids? And, you start realizing, especially when you're locked up with someone for a long time, you start realizing, man, is this something I have to work on? So on this podcast, we're talking to people, marriage counselors, people like yourself with wisdom and knowledge and an understanding in an area. Because I think your topic today of saying, okay, is there a spirit or not? Or do we have evidence of this? Because the argument against religion always, like, you don't have any evidence to support it. It's all touchy-feely stuff, and it's not scientific. Well, we have scientific stuff now. Now, what's your question?
Yeah, so you go from, is there a spiritual realm? There is a spiritual realm. Then it's like, okay, so I need to be concerned about the spiritual realm because there's a part of my immaterial aspect that's present in that world. And so something of me is going to persist. Like after I die, something is going to persist. And so I need to start thinking, okay, well, I need to be prepared for whatever is out there. And is it Buddhism that's going to get me there? Is it Hinduism? Is it Islam? Is it Judaism? Is it Christianity? I mean, what of these systems is going to help me best understand that next world? And for me, what I recognize looking at this world is that I'm fallen. Like I'm a sinful person. People who think that Christians are all good, and you look at examples, oh, see, the Christians, they all do all sorts. There's a bunch of hypocrites. They do a bunch of bad stuff. Put me in that camp, right? I do a bunch of bad stuff. I'm just pretty good at keeping it secret, right? I mean, but it's not just me. I mean, I've been involved in professional counseling long enough to know, and it's everybody. I mean, we all screw up. No matter how much we want to do good things, we don't do what we want to do. And oftentimes we're doing the things we really didn't want to, right? That there's something about us that our conscience, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the conscience, convicts us of I'm falling short. And there's something also true of every one of us, that we desire and have in our hearts and our minds something that's much better. Like there's a longing in all of us for something that just seems a utopia, right? I mean, that's actually where utopia comes from, right? Is this thought of there is the possibility, there is something out there that could be so much better. And for me, it helps me understand, well, that's that sin that I'm like it used to be back in the day when you shopped at TJ Maxx or Marshalls, right? Remember they sold seconds, right? You could buy a shirt for like $12, but like the shirt sleeve was sewed shut or something like that, right? It's like it didn't follow the pattern. Like there's something you get really cheap. It's like that's me as a person. As a person, I'm a second. There's something about me that's not quite the way that it was supposed to be. I long for community, but it's hard to get there. Like I struggle getting, I long to do good things and I don't always do good things. And for me, that helps me understand sin, that there is a pattern that I don't necessarily conform to, that I was designed for, and yet I don't. And I look around and we're all like that sin, and that's just a term. I think it's a pregnant term, right? With all sorts of stuff attached to it. But if we can just think of it as falling short of what we were intended for, that's me. And so the story of Jesus Christ being sent to the earth to atone for that, so that I could be justified. For me, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense that God sent his son, his agent, right? His only son to come and atone for that sin, that I could be made right. And I can tell you, I experienced that. Like I experienced that in a very real way of I am being made, I still make mistakes, I still fall short, but I am being made right. I am being made new. There is a newness in my life because of Jesus Christ. That gives me a hope. And I believe that he rose to life on the third day from the grave, that he came, that he conquered death, that he conquered sin, and that he went back up into the heavens to be with God, the creator of everything. And that I have great hope that one day I'll be with him just because I have faith. Because I put my faith in him, I have great hope that I'll be with him someday. Not because I can earn it, because I can't earn it. No matter how good I am, I'm never going to be able to earn it. And I just know myself. I'll do a lot of good things. I'll do a bunch of bad stuff, and I'll do a lot of good stuff. I mean, I can set my heart and mind on something, but I never get there. But I can put my faith saying, hey, I'm a fallen, I screw up. But Lord, I believe in you. I believe you've forgiven my sins. I know that you desire something much better for me. And I believe that I will experience salvation, that one day I'll be with him because of that. And then when I go into that immaterial realm, that's who I'm looking for. When I go into that immaterial realm, I'm looking for Jesus Christ. That's where I'm looking to go to.
And hopefully you don't have to come back and say there's a shoe on top of the building, right?
I went up. There aren't any.
I don't want to go. Yeah.
But for me, that's what I put my faith in.
Yeah, and that's the truth, and that's how I live my life too. Is like anyone, like I kind of made the joke, and it's true though. If you think I'm perfect, and I have a lot of witnesses, my friends, family, they've seen it. Everyone knows, and I mean we're not perfect. And I think when we realize we're all seconds, then you have grace for other people that you see are seconds. Mm-hmm. You see like they're struggling, they're way behind me maybe, or maybe way ahead of me, but we're all in that journey of life trying to figure it out. And that's why, Life's Best Medicine podcast is like, what do we do? What is life's best medicine? For me, it may be something different than you. Someone may be collecting rocks, or maybe, yoga or whatever it is. But, in your case, like just in closing, I appreciate you joining me today, but just in closing, like, you're on your deathbed and you're talking to your kids, you say, okay, kids, here's life's best medicine. Here's what's really important. Here's what matters. What do you tell them?
I tell them to pursue Jesus Christ and know him through his word and give their life over to him and live for him. For me, that's it. It's all about the cross. I mean, it's all about Jesus Christ's death and resurrection from the cross. That's what I point my kids to. And on the deathbed, anybody who was around that bed, and I had a chance to say, I'd say, you go find out who this guy is and what he's about. Study his word that you might know him personally. Give your life to that. To me, that's the most important thing.
Man, I think that's my most important medicine too. I think that's important for people to hear. And I think, so many people right now are, unsure, struggling, stressed, and worried. And I'm just so happy that you're here. I mean, it's amazing that we're both on the same campus and we get to share this message and, your knowledge base, first of all, but your heart for the kids. I mean, even when we had a little conversation, talking about doing a fast together, I see students walking up to you and thanking you and talking to you, and we're so happy we're here and we love our school. And you see that passion for making the school better. And so hopefully a lot of people listening, if you're stressed and trying to figure out where to send your kids, I mean, I'm this isn't a commercial for the school, but I'm just telling you what I see. This is the reality of what this campus is like. And before I came here, just talking to the guidance counselors and all that, and they were so excited. They loved the kids. They were so happy that they were coming back and they could impact their lives. I think people want to just be that positive force for all of us secondhand people that are here, and all these kids are questioning, am I handsome enough, am I tall enough, am I is my skin too dark, is it am I worthy? And when they say you're worthy, you're made special, and you are even if you can't speak, even if you can't see, you're perfect in God's view, and that's what you're created to do, because you're going to help the other person who can't see, or the other person who's not quite a strong believer yet. And when I see that, it's so exciting, because that's community. That's what we're trying to build here, is this community of people uplifting, loving each other, and just realizing we all have our issues. So when I hear the music going and I hear people up there practicing and preparing so that they can really reach out to kids, and having your chapel time where people are giving their testimony, their story, that will give these kids hope. I mean, the last thing, the biggest concern I have in this group, before I came here, we talked about is suicide rate, in the country. And these are, especially right now during lockdowns, it's devastating what I'm hearing from the counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists around. It's devastating information. But to see kids, just having a, social distancing, but loving each other and smiling and talking about positive, uplifting stuff, man, this is so great, and I could be here to enjoy it. So this is even even better.
Well,
So
we're
hey,
fortunate to have you on our campus. Thanks so much for being here with us.
no, and thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me. I think this is really important. I think being able to not just throw, my intention for this podcast was not just to throw light in people's face and, it's like, you got to do what I do. But I think it's really saying, okay, let me just open the door to questioning, at least saying, okay, is there a spiritual realm? Is God real? Is Christianity hocus pocus? Is there evidence? Is your life story, the stories I hear, I'm blown away. As a believer, I'm blown away, going, man, it's crazy how God just told you have to do this stuff, and you do it. And where you are now compared to where this broken road we took to get to where we're at. Like, who would think you would come all the way across the country and be here, and in your position? It's just remarkable how it all, like, when you look back, you go, I wouldn't have planned it this way, but man, it's pretty remarkable.
It is. Yeah, it really is. I feel very fortunate. I believe this is where God wants us. And, like I said, I am committed to following as well. And we just, what's great about this school is we are producing some world changers, kids going out doing amazing things. And that's what I want to be about, pointing students to Jesus Christ and seeing them go out and make an amazing impact on the world.
Yeah, and that gives me hope for the future too. You see these great young people, and they're like focused and loving each other and bringing each other up, not ridiculing each other. It's amazing to see. So that gives me hope too. So it's just great to to be able to experience this. So people out there without hope, this podcast is here to hopefully give you some hope, light, some life lessons along the way. And you heard some important stuff today. Hopefully it makes you think. And like always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and go out and be blessed. So Dr. Corsini, God bless you. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.